So last session, I have been speaking about drawing capacity from the depths of our being and tapping into our deep time ancestral lineage and inheritance as a source of resilience in these times. And this line of inheritance takes us from the emergence of early humans about more than 2.5 million years ago to today. And I've been sharing with you an image, which we were contemplating together, which I think resonates on a very deep, deep level. And, then this question comes up, who, or better, what is powering this amazing unfolding? Often it's called God, and in a context of Buddhism, we call it Dharma or Dhamma. And I brought a beautiful quote by Father Thomas Berry, who was a Catholic priest. And in one of his earlier books, which is called The Great Work, which I very much really recommend, he writes the following. He says, that the universe is the primary scripture, the primary revelation of the divine, and also the primary locus of divine human communication. So that the divine basically communicates with us and all other species through the unfolding of the cosmos or the universe, or for us, it's this planet, and that this planet is the scripture. And I found that very touching and inspiring, really, to think in this way. It's not in the books. The books are also helpful, but the real revelation of the divine is the planet itself and everything, we find here, including ourselves. And here, at Cloud Mountain, when I walk out into the forest, it's so palpable. The wonder and the awe and the aliveness of this forest is pretty breathtaking to me. And the practice we are doing here at these Wednesday meetings is, via our own bodies and minds, we attune to this aliveness. And in that way, also attuning to this evolutionary momentum that is in process of transforming our species' dominant way of being from human supremacy to human accountability. And this is what's happening right now, and it isn't like a very nice process. It's pretty wild, but I think that's what's happening, the breaking up of the old paradigm, and we are being thrown in this space, of not knowing what's going to come next, this unsettledness of the dying paradigm and the new paradigm not yet being born or being in the process of emerging, and we just see little shoots here and there. But we do know it's all around letting go of human exceptionalism, that we are in any way different from all other species in terms of rights and except, or not having any responsibilities. So we are growing out of this adolescent mind state as a collective into something more mature and more sustainable. And it hurts, because it scares us. As we are growing, into this sacred reciprocity with the Earth's web of life, which we're totally dependent on, but we just didn't know, just like an adolescent who doesn't know who pays the bills. they're evolving into a kind of a co-stewardship with the modern human world by way of relational accountability and also imagination. To imagine different ways of being and of working together. And it's not really that difficult because we can lean into the wisdom of all of the generations which have come before us, and they have literally emerged out of the earth. They have been living in caves and living in really on the ground for millions of years, actually. For more than 2 million years. So there's a lot of information in our system which has been covered over, by lots of other learnings, and we need to find practices and ways to um, bring that online again. And I think that can totally be done. In particular, in cooperation with other intelligences, like the intelligences of plants, for example, who have developed very different ways of coping with stress because they can't move. And for us, the answer is always go somewhere else, go somewhere else, go somewhere else to find food, to run away from danger, to find a partner, to find a house or anything. And plants had to develop other ways of coping with that. And I think we can learn from them. And particularly, here in the forest, that learning is happening. It's a non-verbal learning, and it requires attunement. And in that way, I think we can compose something new. But we can only do that if we can acknowledge endings first. Allowing endings and mortality not as an obstacle to overcome by more technology, but rather by honoring it as a truth, that this biosphere has limits and there's nothing wrong about that. It's just if we think it's wrong, then we can't win anyway, because we are just one amongst many species and we are totally dependent. So that, acknowledging of endings is a very big theme also in the Buddhist teaching on impermanence, which is one of the 3 characteristics. And, that's what we try to create through practice, the capacity to pay attention to endings, not only to beginnings, to young things and new things and pretty things and healthy things, but to also make some space in the mind for endings and for dying and for old age, sickness and death, because it's part of life. It's not the opposite of life. It is part of life. And anyone who is born will get old and will get sick and will die, and it's not our personal failing. So that's, that seems to be like the central logic of modernity, is trying to overcome or outsmart the limits and endings. And now we have run into the wall and we see, no, that's not actually possible. That was just an idea, a dream. And we have all succumbed to it because it's so deeply part of our conditioning. And it's the way, how we relate to the ecosystems and the way how we have built technology, just trying to get more out of everything than what was really sustainable. And now we are sitting, in front of the mess we have created, and we can change. We can take it in and say, okay, I have to take responsibility. I have to be accountable for my consumption. Not just like in terms of, the way we eat or the way, we shop things, but just also the way we relate to information, everything, to each other. So it's just like a paradigm stepping outside of an old paradigm because it's cracking up, and then digesting that what we see, and what we feel, and not losing ourselves in guilt or bad or anything. It's just what it is. It's just ignorance giving way, to the next level of um, expansion of consciousness and inclusion of the modern human world into our circle of care, not relating to the modern human world as a storehouse, for stuff. That's what we are grappling with, right now. To see mortality and endings not as limitations to be defeated, but as a rhythm of life to move with, to dance with, to include it in everything we do. And this would fundamentally shift, how we engage with each other, the systems we create, and our relationship to the biosphere as a limited process, as a limited system. In terms of materiality, it's a limited system. In terms of energy, it's an open system through the power of the sun, which sends down photons, and this is energy, which we can eat through food, and we can also use it through solar energy and so on. But in terms of, stuff here, material like minerals and earth and earth element, water element, it's limited. It's not going to become more or less. Sometimes a meteor might just, land here on the planet, or a spaceship might, go out into space, but otherwise there is no change in terms of the materials here. And we need to take that into account. And we are doing, that's what we are doing. And many people are doing that. And we are just like one little group, one pocket of sanity, being willing to look at that truth and be changed, be rewired by it. So now maybe we can now shift into meditation again. So, finding a posture you can sustain for 40 minutes or so. And, sensing into the body, allowing the breath to take you into the body. And what has been said, allow that to land like snow falling onto warm ground and melting into the soil, the fertile soil, and sensing into the energy body, how you're feeling, what you're bringing with you today. And you're spreading out the awareness throughout the body, maybe a little bit beyond the body, a few inches. And sensing this aliveness. This aliveness which permeates the body, but also the space around us and the ground on which we are sitting. That's all different frequencies of aliveness. And on an energetic level, we really can't find any boundaries. They are merging into each other. Sensing the hardness of the cushion of the chair you're sitting on and the hardness of the ground where your feet are resting on. That's earth element, structure and hardness. And stability. So with the out breath, we can let go of any stress or tension, letting it go down into the earth. And with the in breath, breathing up the stability and the stillness of the vastness of the earth body. Just like trees or other plants, we have grown out of that earth body and we are rooted into it. Even we can walk, but our roots are kind of mobile, through we eating food, we drinking water, breathing air, going to the bathroom. Our roots are kind of different than the roots of a tree. But in the same way, we eat the planet and we drink it, breathe it, goes through us, and then goes back into the planet. And it's an amazing process, to really consider this. This utter intimacy, of interbeing. There is no boundary to be found. Even, this the body is encapsulated by the skin, but there's a lot moving through that skin. And the skin itself is also constantly changing. So expanding perception, perception is empty, just like any other phenomenon. And reshaping perception so it's more in sync with survival. Not stuck in the past when the situation was very different. We need to catch up with what's needed, in order to be informed. Literally, our form being up to date with what needs to be known right now. And we call that evolution. So, breathing up the stability, the stillness, the massiveness of this body of the earth, and opening ourselves to that information which comes to us, via the aliveness, which is a data flow, a data flow without words. But the body can receive it because it's made from the same stuff as the body of the planet. There's an intrinsic, intimate connection there. And the body knows that language. So it's a rewiring, as this evolutionary process is unfolding. Sometimes there's, times when it speeds up somehow, it all, gets really intense right now. And we, experience that as stress when we are pushed to expand. When first life forms came onto dry land, that was a tremendous push. Not having any limbs, not being able to breathe oxygen. They had to adjust. I'm sure that wasn't simple. It was scary, I'm sure. Or coming down from the trees, needing to walk upright to be able to see, in the grasslands of East Africa, where they say it has begun. And now, us, city people mostly, needing to connect with the truth that our body is an earth body. And food doesn't grow in the supermarket on the shelves. So that can be really overwhelming. And then, we can just retort to beating ourselves up and getting lost in feeling guilty. Or we can say, okay, that's how evolution looks like. Or that's what evolution looks like. It's always like a push to expand and become more grounded in this process and become more and more of a participant, like an adult, mature person, and bowing down to what's needed for the whole to continue, like like a good elder, a good ancestor who is willing to find out what's helpful for next generations to be able to thrive, or at least survive this transition. So allowing discomfort to become an ally rather than an enemy. And meeting at the cracks of the old paradigm, like we do here in these Wednesday meetings, meeting together at the cracks and taking an interest what's coming through. Composting the old paradigm by deeply taking in the fact that we need others to be ourselves on all levels, not just like in the human community, but also with the more than human community. And that's just like a new wave of knowing. We kind of, had some ideas about all of this, but we hadn't felt it. We hadn't sensed it like viscerally with the body. It wasn't time yet, but now it is. And some of our indigenous brothers and sisters, they are still in touch with that knowing. Whereas, our own indigenous forebears, they have been, in Europe, they have been under big stress in the Middle Ages with the witch hunts. And we have forgotten most of it. But also, all of us white people, we also have indigenous forebears in our system, and we can lean into that. And by tuning to this aliveness, the energy body, spreading out the awareness throughout the body, and whenever the mind wanders off into thinking about something, coming back and spreading out the awareness throughout the body, a little bit beyond the body. And so the attitude of the mind can be like a kind of listening through the body to this aliveness, and allowing this rewiring to take place. And it can be sometimes, brings up unresolved business as the aliveness is spreading. It brings up unresolved, maybe trauma material, fears, assumptions, all of that, and digesting that, allowing it to be what it is, and sensing, feeling into it, breathing through it with a lot of gentleness. And imagining ourselves inside of Earth, because the planet doesn't end at the ground where our feet rest upon, but it goes on several miles. The atmosphere, the cloud cover, this is all body of planet, and we are literally inside of it like an earthworm. So that's a perception to cultivate, that being within, because that perception, has a number of, I think, psychological repercussions if we do it mindfully and intentionally. Shows us, the vulnerability, the dependency, the lack of control. We have tried to distract ourselves from through scientism. Not speaking about science, but scientism, believing that science can be a religion, can solve all problems through control. And now seeing, no, that was just a wishful thinking. And then if we really allow that to sink in like the snow, melting on the warmth of the body, if we really allow that, there's a sense of putting down defenses, relinquishing defenses, because it makes so much sense to step out of that armor. And being part of a shared communication system with the earth, with Gaia, with that living intelligence which always knows what to do since such a long time. So it's a way of working with perception, an expansion of perception, and a listening into this aliveness. And slowly but surely, and there's a kind of identification with the planetary system starts to emerge, and that's the medicine. To start to relate to the planet as not something other than we are. That separation is, crumbling more and more. And that's what needs to happen, because that will rewire us. And then our thinking, speaking, and doing will be changed from the ground up. And that's the only way how it can be changed. Everything else is not thorough enough. It's helpful also, to point the way, but then it needs to go much deeper in order to really gain traction. And that's, what is more and more understood these days, that we need to change it from the ground up, which means our bodies need to connect with that truth on this very intimate level, that it becomes a really private, deep yearning, to be more real and not, live in a dream world, which was, kind of fashioned in the Middle Ages, really. And then via, those different philosophers, Descartes and all those guys, that were all stepping stones, stepping stones, stepping stones. They need to be left behind. They belong to the history books, and of course they were important, but now we need to get going with something fundamentally different. And of course there's resistance and fear and insecurity and unsettledness and all the rest. To really understand, that if we are saying, we are the body ends at the skin, we can say that, or we can say, the body ends at the ground of the planet, or we can say the body ends at the sun, or the body ends at the edge of the Milky Way. It all makes sense, depending on, because these are, shaped from. So it all is true, and it needs to be included in the way we understand ourselves now. And that has a majesty to it, I think. This process is so profound and wondrous. And that's, the kind of information we need to receive, because that will give us energy, creativity, joy, buoyancy to continue to engage and not surrender to some idiots, who want to go back to the past. That, we are all part of a living, intelligent Earth, or even a living, intelligent cosmos. That's the learning step for the maturation of the species. It's a initiation. And initiations can be very challenging indeed. Throwing us back onto our own strength to stay engaged. And if we don't feel, inspired to do it for ourselves, then thinking about future generations, doing it for them. It's our duty, really. All of those who can. It's no question. So to accelerate the emergence of this instinctive loyalty with the planet, which is in there, in us. That's why we got that far. Now we need to, put in a different gear. And really taking in, that the dying of the old paradigm isn't something wrong. Nothing has gone wrong. This is just how it works. There's always again and again something dying in order something new to be born. So to be okay with that and hospicing modernity. With respect and with kindness. And giving up, to fight against limits. And say, okay, I'm going to respect limits. If they're real limits, I'm going to respect them and I'm going to grow up to work with that. Because we are all woven into this fragile web of life. And it's a sacred web of life precisely because it's so fragile, so fleeting, so impermanent, empty of a self. That makes it sacred. And it needs care and it needs cooperation. It's not just like our wet nurse or something. We have to work together to do this. And that's also the end of patriarchy, which is a certain way of relating to, to the feminine, to the nourishment, and so on. You know that story. It's a big shift. And it's building up since a long time. And now it's really kind of becoming more intense. And the planet with its limitations, squeezing us into being born anew. As a species which is willing to be accountable and to cooperate. And to grow up. So, as we are, allowing these words, to kind of sink in, just sensing, how you feel in your heart area, your chest area. Is there a sense of contraction or a sense of confusion, sense of awe, interest, whatever it is, that's what it is. And the chitta, the heart, is this organ of connecting with, in the Buddhist dispensation, we call it the Dharma. And Father Thomas Berry would have called it the divine. Seeing the body of the planet as a primary revelation of the divine. And that's why the word Dhamma also is translated as nature. So, dropping out of that transcendent divine into an immanent divine at this bottleneck, shifting from one paradigm to the next. And it's this pendulum, which is swinging since the very beginning of time, swinging from one side to the other side. And in this way, we understand that this is samsara. This is how samsara looks like. And as long as we are inside of it, we can participate in a way which brings more space to the process. Going towards full liberation from it. But while we are in it, we can benefit the process by our wisdom and compassion. And at the same time, we benefit ourselves. And with this, the classic sentence of the Brahmavihara of Karuna, may all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. And allowing that wish, to be really felt with the in-breath, and then allowing it to radiate out into spaciousness, permeating this aliveness, which always finds a way. And as growth, is can be painful, the stretch, the unsettledness. It can be a generosity, a form of generosity to allow it to happen through us individually and collectively, rather than shutting down and trying to march back to the past. Standing on this edge with that wish, may all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. As we're seeing a lot of crazy expressions of fear masquerading as some kind of heroism or something. But it's obvious where it's coming from. I'm going to share with you a poem by Kabir. The way of love is not a subtle argument. The door there is devastation. Birds make great sky circles of their freedom. How do they learn it? They fall, and falling, they are given wings. The way of love is not a subtle argument. The door there is devastation. Birds make great sky circles of their freedom. How do they learn it? They fall, and falling, they are given wings. And that's for me a really good image for us too, for the human species, to be willing to open up into this, which looks like very scary, with no ground to stand on. But this is how we learn, to open up new capacities, new strengths, and ways of being in the world, because they are potentials, which need to be called forth through the need of the moment, and by allowing the space for them to land somewhere. And we are doing this together because it is scary and, confusing and the rest of it, but that's what has happened for a long time, 2.5 million years. There's absolute no reason to believe that this should stop now. The paradigm of modernity is cracking up. That will at one time, be a past worldview, but that's it. The rest will happen accordingly, and we'll find a way to continue. Like, going from primary school to secondary school. We didn't know how that's going to be and how we're going to make it and do it and all of that. And it happened. So you're slowly, coming then the next minute or two to the end of the meditation.